In January, we did my annual 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance program where we looked at one thing you could do each day. Well, we're back with the Compliance Tip of the Day. This is the podcast where we bring you daily insights and practical advice on navigating the ever-evolving landscape of compliance requirements. Whether you're a seasoned compliance professional or just starting your journey, my aim in this podcast is to provide you with a bite-sized, actionable tip to help you stay on top of your compliance game. In the chaotic world of 2025 and beyond, compliance will become even more important, and you staying on top of your game will help your company move forward. Today, we take up what can happen when you have an internal control override and a failure of your compliance internal controls. Halliburton is a two-time loser under the FCPA, and in their second FCPA enforcement action, it involved the catastrophic failure of internal controls. The company was trying to get an agent in Angola for a project it wanted to conclude with Senegal. The first attempt to hire the agent was rejected because the local business team wanted to pay a percentage fee base in part upon the work secured under the contract and not new work going forward. In other words, a retrospective application. Additional fees could be paid, but this payment scheme was rejected as the company paid commercial agents for work they helped obtain, not for something in the past. As outlined by the Halliburton Legal Department, to retain the local Angolan company as an agent, it would be required to go through the company's rigorous due diligence process that was put in place after its first FCPA enforcement action. However, the agent was then moved from the status of a commercial agent to a supplier, so the process would move smoother. The proposed reason for this switch in designation was that the agent would provide real estate maintenance, travel, and ground transportation services in Angola. However, the internal controls process around a supplier had a requirement for a competitive bidding process. This control was overridden by party or parties unknown. A second internal control that was overridden was the procurement requirement that this process begin with an assessment of the criticality of the risk, material, or services, not with a particular supplier in mind, and certainly not without competitive bids or any reason for a single source justification. However, the process was taken backward and the control was simply overridden. This arrangement went through the Halliburton process, and even though Halliburton's internal control process required this when a single source was used, the justification for overriding this was the alleged quality, technical, or execution or other reasons of the proposed agent. But those had to be identified and justified, in other words, documented, and of course, that was never done. Who overrode the controls? That's not set out in the order. How did they get done? Once again, not set out in the order. They were either circumvented or overridden. As a consequence, internal audit was kept in the dark about the transactions until many years later and did not review them. Yet another internal control failure based upon the previous failures. How many internal control failures do you see in all this? Well, that's what happens when you have a cascading set of intentional or unintentional failures of internal controls. This failure cost Halliburton millions in terms of an enforcement action. And once again, it was a two-time loser under the FCPA, so that it had a very robust deferred prosecution agreement going forward on this. So what are today's three key takeaways? Number one, internal controls must be shown to be effective. Number two, circumvention and management of internal controls overrides must be documented. And finally, internal controls must be tested, and that testing verified with an independent source of verification or investigation. So you can't investigate your own internal controls. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. One of the things that I'm happy to do for you, the compliance profession, is if you have a question or a series of questions you would like some compliance tips on, I'm happy to take any requests that you might want, certainly anonymize them, and give you a quick tip. Either one quick tip or maybe a week's worth of quick tips. So if you have any tips you want about your compliance program, you can shoot me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This podcast was created and produced with the assistance of AI.